How influential is a movie considered to be? Does it count as highly influential if a country's top officials personally respond to it? What about if it almost affects the relationship between two countries? You might not have seen the Battleship Island, but you can't be unaware of it. The film tells the dark history of Japan's forced conscription of Korean peninsula and Chinese laborers during World War II. Women were forced into sexual slavery as comfort women and suffered immensely, while men were forced to become miners, working 1,000 meters underground in extremely dangerous conditions, where explosions could happen at any moment. Even children weren't spared. They lived an inhuman life there. Yet, decades later, Battleship Island not only successfully gained UNESCO World Heritage status, but was also transformed into a tourist attraction by Japan, which to this day has not acknowledged that dark history told today. Let's revisit the Battleship Island, review history through the film, and see what monstrous crimes were committed on that island back then. Before the film begins, let's understand the historical background. The story takes place on a small island off Nagasaki, Japan. Due to its surrounding waters and resemblance to a battleship, it was commonly known as Battleship Island, originally called Hashima Island. Because of its rich coal deposits, it was purchased by Japan's Mitsubishi Company in 1890. After multiple land reclamations, it became Japan's coal industry base at the time. With the outbreak of World War II, Japan swept across Southeast Asia, leading to a shortage of domestic labor. So, through forced conscription or deceptive yopan enticement, they brought 40,000 people from their colonized territories, mostly Chinese and Koreans. Mitsubishi Company took over 3,700 people and forced them to work in its various factories. In coal mines, Battleship Island was the most representative. The island's coal mine was located 1,000 meters vertically below sea level. Laborers worked more than 20 hours a day in mine shafts with temperatures above 45 degrees centigrade, and gas explosions, stampedes, and landslides were common. At the same time, they were heavily monitored to prevent escape. Therefore, this tunnel leading underground was also called the Gate of Hell. The film is precisely adapted from this period of history. Alright, after this general overview, the film officially begins. The director immediately uses black and white tones to show us the true plight of the laborers on Battleship Island, dim, confined, and without sunlight. The visual effects alone are enough to make the audience feel an extremely oppressive atmosphere. One day, a young boy digging coal experienced a gas leak. A large amount of seawater gushed in. The boy frantically crawled outwards, but the Japanese supervisor, seeing this, whipped him back in. Immediately after, the cave collapsed, burying the boy alive. The boy's death stirred many people. 3 teenagers found Yoon Hak-sul, a Korean labor leader, and told him they wanted to escape. Before leaving, Yoon Hak-sul encouraged them to survive. Soon, under the cover of night, the 3 came to a sewer, but one of the teenagers fell and was discovered by the stationed Japanese soldiers, who beat him to death on the spot. The other 2 could only leave in pain. Unexpectedly, just after escaping, a boat came from behind and accurately struck the 2 into the sea. The people who came were the Japanese soldiers who were pursuing them. They did not offer help, but used even more cruel methods to torture the 2 teenagers to death. So, the question is, how did the stationed Japanese soldiers know that someone would escape that night? The director laid a plot twist here. The scene shifts to Myeongdong, Korea. It was a time of Japanese occupation, and a large number of young Koreans were being conscripted and sent to Japan. This night, a farewell ceremony was held in the theater. Our protagonist, Lee Kang-ok, was the band leader performing for the farewell ceremony. Very quick-witted and smooth in his dealings. His daughter, Sohee, often followed her father and was a well-known child star in the area, proficient in singing and playing instruments. After the banquet, Lee Kang-ok met a police friend at a restaurant to discuss going to Japan to work. At that time, Korea was colonized by Japan, and the economic situation was very difficult. Life was not affluent. Therefore, many people chose to go to Japan to find work opportunities to improve their living conditions. Coincidentally, this police friend had connections and could help Lee Kang-ok find an office job in Japan. After a year of hard work, he could buy a house. Anyone would be tempted by such a good offer. So, Lee Kang-ok paid a high agency fee and took his daughter and band members onto a cruise ship bound for Japan. This was a cruise ship, but the cabin environment was extremely poor, full of vomit, and hundreds of people shared a few toilets. Besides those conscripted and temporarily arrested, there were also those like Lee Kang-ok who were introduced by acquaintances. It was at this moment that a commotion broke out among the crowd. A ruffian named Choi Kyle-sung got into a fight with someone, and the sounds of fighting in the cabin alarmed the Japanese soldiers, who took out water guns to stop the commotion and issued a warning. If they didn't listen to the advice, they would be shot on the spot. Kyle-sung didn't understand Japanese and still wanted to argue with the Japanese soldiers. Fortunately, a woman named Malnia next to him translated and persuaded them, and only then did everyone quiet down. The cruise ship sailed for an unknown amount of time and finally arrived at Shimonoseki port in Japan. But the first to disembark were all Japanese or Japanese soldiers. It was then that we completely understood that the Koreans were in the lowest level of the cruise ship and didn't even have the right to disembark with the Japanese. When they disembarked, many Japanese police officers suddenly appeared around them, maintaining order. Lee Kang-ok thought he had connections. So he took out a recommendation letter and went to an officer, trying his best to introduce himself. But the officer didn't even look at it and ordered the police to take him away. While being pushed and shoved, Lee Kong-ok suddenly found the ground covered with recommendation letters. It was at this moment that he realized he had been tricked. Unfortunately, it was too late. Under the coercion and control of the Japanese police, everyone was locked in train cars and sent to different factories as laborers. Lee Kong-ok, Kyle-sung, Mal-neon, and others boarded the Hashima Mine area personnel transport ship. Not long after, an island resembling a battleship appeared before everyone. Yes, they were transported to Battleship Island to work as laborers. Before the ship even docked, the stationed Japanese soldiers boarded the ship and swung their sticks, attacking indiscriminately. After seeing that the Koreans did not dare to resist, they transported the women and children separately. Lee Kong-ok was forced to separate from his daughter. After landing on the island, the men were taken to the square. The supervisors would confiscate all their valuables, and slight non-compliance would result in beatings. These supervisors were actually Koreans, oppressing their own compatriots. To protect himself, Lee Kong-ok bravely approached the head supervisor, desperately, introducing himself and taking off his watch to bribe the other party. Then he led his team to play music to demonstrate their value. Soon, the music attracted a Japanese officer. He stepped forward and asked if they could play Sakura Sakura Lee. Kong-ok did not hesitate and led his team to play again. The director of Battleship Island, hearing the music, also came out and gave a brainwashing speech into the microphone. Frankly speaking, it was dressing evil in beautiful clothing. Afterward, everyone was stripped, sprayed with disinfectant powder, and escorted by Japanese soldiers and supervisors to the dormitory. During this time, they were also told that they would receive wages for working here, but accommodation, food, and clothing would be deducted from their wages. The remaining amount would be kept by the company for them. Entering the dormitory, it was dim and damp. A single step could cause water to splash. The food was worse than pig slop. After meals, there was no rest time. They were immediately sent deep underground to dig coal. The women were not doing any better. The first thing they did after landing on the island was to go to the hospital. For examination, those who were healthy and disease-free would be taken to the brothel to be comfort women. Among them, Mal-neon's tattoo caught the attention of the Japanese during her examination. They all showed signs of disgust because this tattoo was a unique mark for comfort women. The scene shifts. Lee Kong-ok and others, who had just finished work, were driven into the bathhouse to wash. One man's glasses were accidentally stepped on and broken. The head supervisor rushed over and started beating him with a stick. At this point, Kyle-sung, who was nearby, couldn't stand it and asked Lee Kong-ok to translate, telling the Japanese officer that he wanted to have a one-fight with the head supervisor. If he won, he would manage the Koreans from then on. The Japanese officer saw this and smiled, agreeing and betting with those around him on the outcome. The winner would get a free pass to the brothel. This shows that in their eyes, laborers, regardless of gender, were merely things. After getting permission, the battle began. Ultimately, the head supervisor was defeated. Kyle-sung even struck a harsh blow, leaving a bloody mark on his face. It was at this moment that Yoon Hak-chul walked in. As a representative of the laborers, he naturally had to step forward to stop this infighting among compatriots.
아니 저놈들이 원하는 거요. 우리가 싸우면 싸울수록 저놈들 손에 놀아나게 되는 거라고.
이 새끼가 같은 조선놈이라는 거야? 뭘 봐, 이 빠가로 조세진 새끼들아! 지금부터 내가 조선을 어여보여 앞으로 조선 사람들 문제없이 잘 이끌 테니 들어주시오.
Just like that, Kyle-sung became the head supervisor. Seeing this, Lee Kong-ok and his team rushed forward to sing and celebrate to please Kyle-sung. The scene returns to the women. They all put on Japanese clothes and heavy makeup and were taken to a tavern to serve the director and others. They didn't even spare young So-hee. Seeing this, So-hee was terrified, her eyes full of fear. At this moment, music suddenly sounded in the tavern, and this song was sung by So-hee. She seemed to see a lifeline, grabbed the record poster, and ran onto the stage, asking Mal-neon to translate for her.
언니 이 노래 내가 불렀다고 얘기해주세요. 내가 불렀다고 얘기해주세요. 언니 얘기해주세요.
今流れてる歌、あの子が歌ったそうです。
언니가 춤추고 노래하고 악기도 다루고 뭐든지 다 할 수 있어요. 나 밥 정도 빨래 뭐든지 다 할 수 있어요 언니.
自分は踊りも歌も楽器もできるし、数も上手だそうです。
何をやってた子だ?
너 뭐더더 나냐고 물어.
경상에서 악담 활동을 했었어요. 야마무라 가쿠단.
케이조의 야마무라楽団で活動したそうです。
天皇陛下 반자이! 반자이! 반자이!
텐노해가!
With So-hee's efforts, she found a way out for herself and her father. The director ordered Lee Kong-ok and his team to be brought over. After so long, the father and daughter finally met. Seeing his daughter's makeup and frightened face, Lee Kong-ok felt particularly heartbroken, but still forced to smile. It was from this day onwards that Lee Kong-ok and his team no longer had to work in the mine. They only needed to perform and clean the tavern every day. Taking advantage of this convenience, Lee Kong-ok secretly hoarded all the leftover Japanese alcohol in the tavern to butter up and establish connections. Meanwhile, an accident occurred in the mine shaft. While everyone was working, a minecart suddenly lost control and slid down at an extremely high speed. The minecart's descent broke the electrical wires, reacting chemically with the leaking gas, causing a violent explosion in the tunnel. The director was furious upon learning this. There was gas everywhere underground. Once the explosion spread, all the tunnels could be blown up. So, the director made a cruel decision. He decisively ordered the destruction of the accident tunnel, trapping the laborers alive inside. Those were dozens of lives. After the tunnel was destroyed, the director showed no remorse, still talking and laughing until his subordinate reported that Yoon Hak-chul was also in the tunnel. Only then did he completely panic. If Yoon Hak-chul unfortunately died, the Koreans might riot. The consequences of that would be more than he, as director, could bear. At this point, he could only rescue Yoon Hak-chul. Many people were injured in the lower part of the tunnel, and the exit was blocked. Under Kyle Sung's leadership, everyone found a weak spot and prepared to dig through to escape from the adjacent tunnel. But manual digging was too slow. At this point, a laborer suggested,
다른 방법이 없지 않소. 버팀목을 여기 집중적으로 세우고.
This person who made the suggestion was Park Mu-young, whose real identity was a Korean special agent sent by his superior to rescue Yoon Hak-chul. Japan was losing ground on the battlefield, and the war could end at any time. So a person with prestige was needed to rally morale, and Yoon Hak-chul was the perfect candidate. To ensure everything went smoothly, everyone made a rope pull trolley. Park Mu-young would go in to detonate the gas, and the others would quickly pull him out. After receiving the signal. After everyone was rescued, they all crowded into the hospital, waiting for Yoon Hak-chul. Fortunately, he only had a leg injury and was not in life-threatening condition. The laborers applauded and cheered. Yoon Hak-chul put on an indignant demeanor and promised that if the company did not disclose the casualty figures and provide compensation, he would no longer accept private meetings with the director. This implied that laborers and the company would no longer communicate, and riots or strikes could occur. Due to the heavy casualties from the tunnel explosion, Kyle Sung's supervisor position was revoked. He took his subordinates to the tavern to drink away his sorrows. Coincidentally, he saw a Japanese man grabbing Malnian and rushing downstairs, constantly beating her. At the critical moment, Kyle Sung intervened and saved her. Afterward, the two went upstairs. During their casual conversation, Malnian actively brought up her tattoo, and we learned that she had been tricked by a compatriot and taken to China, where she experienced hell on earth, witnessing a female compatriot being carried onto a spiked bed by Japanese men, rolled back and forth, and eventually dying before her eyes. Malnian wanted to commit suicide but was unexpectedly rescued by a Japanese doctor. The first thing she saw when she woke up was 3 Japanese soldiers holding her tightly, tattooing her. Later, she finally escaped but was caught by her compatriots and sent here. Her words were full of hatred for her compatriots. On the other side, after the tunnel explosion, the news reached the head office. A person named Chiba called the director to question him. Since the war situation was not good, the company did not want to bear the treatment costs for the laborers. So they issued an order to send the seriously injured and the dead to the crematorium, and the director, to please his superior, even attempted to give Sohee as a gift to Chiba to be adopted as his daughter. That night, the director invited Lee Kong-ok to his home and told him his thoughts.
娘のサキのことですが、本社の千葉さんがこの前米軍の空襲でサキと同じ年のボロの娘さんを亡くされました。サキがここで暮らすのも過酷な場所でもあり、私の考えですが、サキを千葉さんの養女に出してはどうかと。
As a father, he certainly would not be willing, but if he resisted, the only outcome was death. Lee Kong-ok himself didn't care. But what about his daughter? This was a multiple-choice question with only one answer. Survival was more important than anything. The scene shifts to Yoon Hak-chul's dormitory. Park Mu-young personally came to confess his identity and explained his rescue plan.
선생님과 접촉 후 이곳 전신망을 이용해 본부의 OSS 조선인 요원들과 연락하기로 했어. 여기 들어오는 식량 조달선의 시험에 우리 측 요원과 접촉해 배편으로 오키나와에 주둔 중인 미군 기지로 들어갈 거야.
Park Mu-young's plan was perfect, but the biggest problem now was that his identity made it impossible for him to access communication tools. After some discussion, they approached Lee Kong-ok. When it came to who was most well-connected and influential on Battleship Island, even the supervisor team couldn't compare to Lee Kong-ok. Yoon Hak-chul's subordinate promised that if he agreed to help, he would be given a large sum of money afterward, and they even brought a deposit. Lee Kong-ok knew that this matter was certainly not simple, so he immediately said that he could help, but they had to truthfully tell him what they wanted him to do. Helplessly, Park Mu-young could only tell the truth.
윤학철 선생이 이곳을 나갈 거야.
여보, 이거 보기. 열쇠만 구해주면 아무 문제 없다니까.
何してるんだ。もうすぐ通行禁止時間だったのに。それはそうと、ここで何やってんだ。
バクチの借金で喧嘩ばかりしてるから 올해가 처사의 시대로 또 그러다요. 빠가야로 조센징기. 잔도 못 오를 거라. 신바의 시대이데 시것도 싫어요.
After sending the Japanese away, Lee Kang-ok turned around and threw the deposit back. He agreed to help get the key to the telegraph room on the condition that Yoon Hak-shul would take him and his daughter when he left. If he didn't agree, he wouldn't help even if he was killed. Ultimately, Park Moo-young agreed to the request. The next day, Lee Kang-ok found his daughter and solemnly told her that he would come to pick her up in the middle of the night in the next few days, and that she must act immediately then. Afterward, while cleaning, Lee Kang-ok blew flour into the keyhole of the telegraph room. After the Japanese opened the door, they would know which key it was. Then he had his subordinate distract the Japanese, while he himself hid in a corner, heated the key with a candle, imprinted it on a film, and then gave the key shape to a craftsman he had bribed in advance. Just like that, he obtained 3 keys. On the night he got the keys, Park Moo-young sneaked in and successfully contacted the outside world using the telegraph machine. When the liaison asked how many passengers there were, Park Moo-young replied to, he did not fulfill his promise. After doing all this, Park Moo-young found a safe in the corner, which contained the personal information of the Korean laborers and their wage ledgers. Park Moo-young was shocked when he saw them. The next day, American bombers flew over Battleship Island. To avoid bombing, the director ordered all lights to be turned off. This was the perfect time to escape. Unexpectedly, as they walked out, they ran into patrolling soldiers. Park Moo-young decisively acted, twisting the soldier's neck and searching for a weapon. Coincidentally, Lee Kang-ok was next door. Hearing the commotion, he peeked out and, seeing the two escape, did not notify anyone. Lee Kang-ok was furious and quickly notified So-hee, taking his daughter to chase after them. On the other side, after Park Moo-young took Yoon Hak-shul to the warehouse, he was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he pulled out the ledger found in the safe and questioned him.
회사에서 국채회비나 근로적금 등으로 성공제를 하고 남은 대부분의 돈들이 징용자들 통장이 아니라 엉뚱한 곳으로 들어가더군요. 조선인들 전체 계약을 윤학철 이름으로 해두고 윤학철 통장으로 들어간 돈 중 절반은 다시 시마자키 소장한테로 들어가고 있었습니다. 죽은 사람들 보상금까지 들어가고 있었습니다. 이 섬에서 탈출이나 파업이 실패할 수밖에 없었던 이유가 뭘까 생각해봤습니다. 조선인들을 통제할 수 있는 지도자를 세워주고 그를 이용한다면 지금과 같은 통제가 가능하죠. 구미위원회에서 내준 거액의 운영자금을 운반하다가 일본 경찰에 발각된 사람이 어떻게 재판도 받지 않고 바로 이곳으로 징용할 수 있게 되었는지.
조선도 같은 놈이 올 줄 알고 있었어.
전향서, 일본에 전향하지 않았다면 당신은 감옥에 있어야 말이 돼요.
Yes, it echoed the opening. Why didn't those 3 boys escape? It was because of the traitor Yoon Hak-shul's. On the surface, he was the backbone of the Korean laborers, but in reality, he was a Japanese spy. Just as the two were confronting each other, Lee Kang-ok burst in with his daughter. He indignantly questioned why he had been deceived. Yoon Hak-shul immediately changed his expression, falsely claiming that Park Moo-young was an American spy, and that if they reported him now, he would guarantee his and his daughter's safe departure from here. But Lee Kang-ok only cared when the boat would arrive. It was at this moment that Yoon Hak-sul's subordinate rushed in and abducted So-hee. The more chaotic the scene, the easier it would be for Yoon Hak-sul to escape suspicion. Park Moo-young decisively took out the ledger and let them judge for themselves. Learning that Yoon Hak-shul was a spy, the subordinate also let go of So-hee. Park Moo-young then held a gun to Yoon Hak-shul, vowing to execute him on the spot.
당신은 반민족 행위로 임시정부에 고발하고.
At a critical moment, Battleship Island was bombed by American forces. Yoon Hak-shul took advantage of the chaos to snatch the weapon, and his subordinate rushed forward, wrestling with Park Moo-young. Lee Kang-ok, meanwhile, escaped with the ledger. The bombing continued on Battleship Island, and screams constantly echoed. Even the director was severely wounded. Everyone rushed towards the air raid shelter, but the stationed Japanese soldiers blocked the laborers outside. Anyone who approached was shot dead. Finally, the air raid shelter door closed, and a bomb happened to land in the crowd. In an instant, many laborers were killed or injured. The scene then cuts to the warehouse. In the chaos, Mayung picked up a gun, intending to execute Yoon Hak-shul, but found that the gun had no bullets. Yoon Hak-shul, on the other hand, wounded Moo-young and disappeared. Immediately after, the subordinate also rushed over, asking concernedly if Yoon Hak-shul was injured. But what surprised everyone was that Yoon Hak-shul immediately turned hostile and killed his subordinate to silence him. This scene was coincidentally witnessed by Lee Kang-ok, who was hiding nearby, further confirming that Yoon Hak-shul was a spy. After the bombing, Battleship Island was in ruins, and countless laborers were dead or injured. Yoon Hak-shul frantically rushed out, searching for Lee Kang-ok's body, fearing that his identity would be exposed. He finally relaxed when he heard that someone had seen the body. Due to the director being severely wounded, the squad leader urgently contacted his superior, hoping the company could provide aid as soon as possible. But his superior informed him that the Americans had dropped a new type of bomb on Hiroshima, and Japan would soon be defeated. Hearing this news, the squad leader, to avoid being tried as a war criminal after defeat, immediately decided to eliminate all laborers on the island. The squad leader then found Yoon Hak-shul and explained the situation, asking him to find a way to eliminate all Korean laborers. Their secret plot was coincidentally overheard by Moo-young and So-hee, who were hiding in the ceiling. It turned out he wasn't dead. Lee Kang-ok had saved him when he was seriously wounded. Not only that, but the two also put aside their past differences and decided to expose Yoon Hak-sul publicly and lead everyone off the island. While Mu-young and So-hee were hiding in the ceiling, eavesdropping, Lee Kang-ok sneaked into Yoon Hak-chul's residence and found the ledger and incriminating evidence. Not long after, Yoon Hak-chul gathered all the laborers in the mineshaft and delivered an impassioned speech, claiming that he would fight for equal treatment for all Koreans with the Japanese. For the long-exploited laborers, this was an almost unattainable luxury. At that moment, they cheered with joy, but they never imagined that the person before them was planning to betray them all. At a crucial moment, Mu-young appeared and exposed the lie. At this time,
소장은 죽었어. 여러분이 내일 입경하면 소장 대신 야마다가 여러분을 매몰시킬 거요.
박무영이 더 이상 우리를 혼란에 빠뜨리지 마라.
미군이 이미 오키나와를 점령했고 이제 전쟁이 얼마 안 남았어. 저기 윤학철은 야마다와 함께 여러분을 이곳에 매몰시키고 이 섬을 빠져나가 미군에게 도망갈 계획이오.
덕전아, 저놈은 우리 조선인들을 분탕질하는 잠입하는 밀정이야 밀정.
여러분들은 전쟁 물자를 공급한 하시마의 전쟁 범죄를 증명해줄 결정적인 존재들입니다. 그렇기 때문에 회사는 여러분들을 갱도 안에 매몰시켜 증거를 없애려고 하는 거요.
Lee Kang-ok also appeared with the ledger and recounted in detail how Yoon Hak-chul and the director colluded to embezzle the laborers' wages. But despite this, some people still stood up to support Yoon Hak-sul, believing that Mo-young and Lee Kang-ok were slandering him. Seeing this, a man wearing glasses stepped forward and said that he could prove Yoon Hak-chul was a spy. That night at the warehouse, he was hiding outside and not only witnessed a confrontation, but also personally saw Yoon Hak-chul kill his subordinate. So he also bravely stepped forward. With so many witnesses, the laborers began to waver and decided to look at the ledger before making a decision. Yoon Hak-chul tried to escape, but Mu-young shouted to stop him.
이토 다카미치 윤학철!
자네들의 피땀 흘린 그 돈은 결국 일본 놈들의 더러운 돈 아닌가?
민족의 적과 내통한
그 돈으로 조선 독립의 보탬이 되려 했던 내가 잘못했나?
인민들의 피를 빨아 사리사욕을 채운 죄.
이게 나만을 위한 독립인가?
지도자 행세를 하며 민중을 기만한 죄를 물어.
이것이 가겠다!
너의 반민족 행위를
여기서 날 죽이면 당장 해방이라도 되게버리다!
조선의 이름으로 처단한다.
너희들이 지금까지 또 때문에
Then Mu-young explained that as long as they rebelled and seized the coal transport ship, everyone could leave. Hearing this, the laborers once again became divided. Some wondered, what if they were discovered by the Japanese during the escape? Others naively thought they could sit down and negotiate with the Japanese through dialogue, even believing that the Japanese were more civilized than them. Seeing their compatriots so disunited, Lee Kang-ok said something like this.
에이 쌍 속에 천불났어 진짜. 누가 조선 종자들 아니랄까봐. 상황이 여기까지 왔으면 살 생각들을 해야 될 거 아니야. 허구한 날 저 발표 살다 보니까 뭐 알아서 기는 게 습관 됐어? 난 인연이랑 살아야겠으니까.
저도 갈래요.
To ensure the plan went smoothly, they first had to control those who advocated negotiations. Immediately after, Mu-young began to deploy his forces. He had people take out the explosives from the tunnel and tie them to flashlight batteries, forming a demolition team. The injured were responsible for dismantling all the tatami mats and assembling them into shields to block bullets. The women were responsible for connecting strips of cloth to make ropes. Lee Kang-ok, on the other hand, led people to turn glass bottles into Molotov cocktails. As for Mo-young, he was to seize the transport ship. With everything ready, everyone waited for the signal. As long as the ship was successfully seized, they would leave one by one in the order of women, children, and the injured, climbing onto the transport belt. Then Mo-young set off with his men. After eliminating all the guards, they successfully took control of the transport ship. Upon receiving the signal, everyone began to act. They climbed onto the conveyor belt, took out the ropes they had prepared in advance, and successfully reached the ship. The plan was originally very smooth, but a few Japanese people ruthlessly set fire to the living quarters of the Korean women. This was only because they had paid to come to the island and wanted to buy some Korean women to take back. But now the opportunity was slim, so they became ruthless and wanted to burn them to death. Flames shot into the sky, attracting the attention of patrolling soldiers. While heading to the scene, they discovered the fleeing laborers. With no other choice, Mu-young had to open fire, thus alarming the Japanese. Under the fierce attack of the Japanese, the laborers were completely terrified. Although Mo-young kept resisting, he was too outnumbered. just as the Japanese were approaching Kailsung and Malnian with their subordinates, stood on high ground and launched a fierce attack. They had just raided the armory, and each of them had a gun. With a moment to breathe, Moyoung immediately took the pre-prepared teams and began to resist. Buying time for Lee Kung-goke, he tore a military flag into pieces and tied them to the conveyor belt, then instructed everyone to raise it, finally propping it up against a high wall, forming an escape route, and the battle entered a fierce stage. After Lee Kung-goke succeeded, Kailsung and his subordinates and Malnian moved closer. It was at this moment that can be said that Kailsung and Malnian saved everyone, but ultimately died at the hands of their compatriots. Of course, those people also met a bad end, being killed by the Japanese as soon as they rushed over. At the same time, the squad leader also noticed Lee Kung-goke and Mu. He decisively opened fire, knocking both of them to the ground, and held Sohee hostage. The scene shifts. They finally successfully escaped and embarked on their journey home. Unfortunately, Lee Kung-goke's injuries were too severe, and he didn't make it before dying. He entrusted his daughter to Mobyong. At this moment, a dazzling light appeared in the distance, and the scene gradually turned black and white. At 11:02 a.m. on August 9, 1945, an atomic bomb exploded in Nagasaki. The screen turned black and white, but the mushroom cloud formed by the atomic bomb explosion remained bright. The director showed no hesitation here. He treated the destructive power of the atomic bomb as the hope and anger of all those who were persecuted by Japan due to the war. The film ends with Sohee's crying face. On her dark face, only her eyes, reflecting the atomic bomb explosion, are full of light. This is also what I admire most about director Ryu Sung-won. He did not hide his hatred for those who once oppressed and enslaved his people. The Battleship Island is indeed based on true history, but note that it is an adaptation, not a factual recreation. The scenes we see on screen are often less than 1/10 of reality. So it's impossible to imagine how desperate the people trapped on Battleship Island truly were. In reality, no one escaped. It wasn't until the end of World War II and Japan's defeat that the laborers on the island were released and returned home. In 2013, after director Ryu Sung-won finished filming The Berlin File, he saw a photo of Battleship Island. This photo gave him inspiration. When he learned about the relevant history, he felt deeply ashamed of his ignorance of this period and conceived the idea of making a film, solely to tell more people the truth about history. So what exactly happened? Back then, let's take this opportunity to reconstruct history. After Japan annexed Korea in 1910, it began to forcibly conscript laborers. When it invaded our northeast, it also conscripted a large number of laborers, all of whom were sent to various factories in Japan, without exception. Battleship Island had not only Koreans but also our own compatriots. According to survivors, laborers only received a tiny bit of food each day but had to work for at least 20 hours in coal mines, 1,000 meters underground. Once they fell ill, it meant death. The death rate exceeded 20%. Gas could spray from rock fissures at any time, easily causing explosions. Many coal miners were buried in the mine shafts due to collapses caused by explosions, sleeping forever under the sea. Many tried to escape, but ultimately drowned, making this place a true hell island. In contrast, the Japanese lived in luxurious apartments on the island, enjoying lavish lifestyles with various vegetables, grains, and fine wines every day. The coal production on Battleship Island reached its peak at 410,000 tons. These were all dug and crushed by hand by Koreans and our compatriots, and every piece was stained with the blood and tears of Chinese and Korean laborers. It is precisely such a place that was listed as a World Heritage Site. In July 2015, Japan successfully applied for UNESCO World Heritage status for the industrial facilities remaining on the island, citing them as the first successful industrial revolution site in a non-Western country. Although the World Heritage Committee requested Japan to tell the whole history and explain to the world the little-known history of Battleship Island, Japan promised to do so. However, to this day, the atrocities behind this World Heritage Site have been deliberately concealed. What's even more unexpected is that Japan has transformed Battleship Island into a tourist attraction. and many games and animations even use it as a primary filming location. That's why director Ryu insisted on filming the Battleship Island, just to let more people know the truth. The director's team also collaborated with Korean netizens to raise 200 million Korean won to produce a video titled If Known. That was played 7,000 times in New York's Times Square. After the film's release, it caused a huge stir. The Japanese government officially responded, stating that it was not a true historical account but fiction. Japanese media even believed that the film would affect Japan-Korea relations. At the end of the film, after the atomic bomb exploded, we see a boatload of people sailing towards their homes. But in reality, after the explosion, many more laborers were forced onto the island by the Japanese army to provide relief for the heavily damaged Nagasaki. And many workers died from nuclear radiation. This is a film that lets the world know historical truth, and I have seen many people comment, you may not watch it, but you cannot be unaware of it. You may not like it, but you cannot disrespect it. When war comes, we, ordinary people, are the first to get hurt. This is the commentary for the movie, The Battleship Island.